Hey guys, it's Penguin here and welcome back to another gold making video. In today's video, I'll be continuing my knowledge point series and we'll be talking about my favorite spots to farm weekly knowledge points. To those who are still a little bit unfamiliar with this system, every single week each profession has 4 world drops that each grant 1 knowledge point each. Now 2 of these world drops come from treasures and dirt that you can just dig up, around the map, while 2 of them come from creature drops. And so in today's video, I'm going to be showing you my favorite spots to get those 2 creature drops. But without further ado, we are going to jump right into it, so thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to skip around to whatever profession you need, and let's get into it. And before we dive into drops, I quickly want to highlight a super useful tracking WeakAura. This is the personal one that I use. I will have it linked in the description down below. There are many of them out there, so just pick one that you like the best, but this will display your weekly knowledge points and how to get them. So it will say, hey, I have a profession quest, hey, you can get some from digging dirt, or hey, you actually need to go kill these enemies to get your creature drop. And that's exactly what we're highlighting today. So in combination with all of these spots and this WeakAura, you'll be able to simply track and complete all of your knowledge points per week. And so up first we have Leatherworking. Now the 2 Leatherworking drops you have is the ossified hide as well as the exceedingly soft skin. Now the hide drops from any sort of proto-drake, and my favorite spot to go is just the simple starter zone. This is a very famous skinning spot if you guys enjoy skinning, and I mean everybody's been there at least once because you had to start the game. So just run around here, kill all of the big proto-drakes, and you're good to go. Then the soft skin is a little bit harder to get, and this drops from the Sliverns or the Vorkin, which are kind of just the deer creatures around the world. Now there are many spots to farm this, but personally I like this specific ledge in Thaldraszus. There's a lot of them there, and I generally get it pretty fast. Up next we have Inscription, and I just want to say I apologize, there's going to be a lot of mispronunciations because I am awful with all of these names. But the first item is the Draconic Glamour, which drops from Dragonkin enemies. Now, I actually have 2 different locations, and based on the rest of this video, you can choose what's best for yourself. Firstly, right outside of Valdrakken, there is kind of a cave type of area. It's opened up, but it's kind of in a valley, and there are rebel enemies. Killing these rebels will have a chance of dropping this item. Now, the one downside about this area, yes, it's closer, but the mobs are a lot tougher than the second area, which are the Ember Tooths in this other sort of cavern/valley area on another part of Thaldraszus. So it's kind of up to you which one you want to choose, but both of them drop it just fine. The second inscription item that we have is the Curious Dejardian Rune. Once again, I have no idea if this is pronounced correctly, but nevertheless, these are dropped by different Dejardian enemies. Now, there are a ton of areas that have these creatures in them, but I like this specific spot in the Waking Shores because it's very popular for profession quest, meaning depending on your other profession, it could work out very well. Next up, we have Tailoring, and the first item that we have is the Onaran Weave. And these drop from any of the no-cood enemies, which are basically scattered around the plains. My favorite spot is this kind of small camp in the middle of the zone, but there's also a very popular spot kind of towards the east where a world quest happens, and that is super good as well. Secondly, we have the Stupidly Effective Stitchery, which drops from any sort of knoll, and the northern part of Thaldraszus has a ton of knolls, and this is by far my favorite spot to get this item. Next up, we have Enchanting, and we have the Primalist Charm, which drops from any Primalist enemy. My favorite spot for this is mid-Thaldraszus. There is a bridge area that has a lot of Primalist enemies that are great to kill. Then you have the Primordial Ether, which drops from any arcane enemy. My favorite spot is actually within the Arcane Archives, which is in the Azure Span, And depending on how far you've gotten in the campaign with that character, you're either going to be killing hostile destabilized enemies, or you're going to be killing the yellow stabilized enemies. Either way, it doesn't matter, they both drop this item. Next up, we have Jewelcrafting, and we have the Incandescent Curio, which drops from any sort of elemental enemy. My favorite are the Blazing Elementals. I will actually mention this again in just a second, but these Blazing Elementals are kind of in the west side of the Waking Shores, near the Siege starting area, and this is a great spot, and also a common spot for a world quest that happens there as well. Then we love these names, but we have the Elegantly Engraved Embellishment, which drops from any of the No-Cud or the Sundered Flame enemies. And this is actually going back to other spots we've talked about. So you can either kill the Rebels, which we talked about in Thaldraszus with Inscription, or you can go to the East Camp area inside of the Plains where we talked about with Tailoring and kill those guys there. Either way, it's completely up to you, but maybe if you have Tailoring or Inscription with your Jewelcrafting, you can pair up with the same area to cut down on your time farming. Up next, we have Alchemy, and we have the Elementus Splinter, which also drops from elemental enemies. And my favorite spot for this are the Steam Elementals or Air Elementals on the east side of the Anaran Plains. Once again, this is another popular world quest area and very, very easy to kill lots of creatures. Then we also have the Decaying Phlegm, which comes from any sort of enemy that drops rousing decays. Now, this is where you need to pay a little bit of attention for Alchemy. My favorite spot to farm this is the Decaying Zone inside the Azure Span. It's like right north of the Tuscar area, and it's very common. There was a quest line there. There's also generally a profession quest there, but not all creatures in that area actually drop this. The kind of creatures you want to focus on are the rotting trees or treants, and also the different decaying oozes. So all of the gnolls that are kind of in that area don't actually drop this. You can look on Wowhead if you want an actual list of the enemies, but just keep that in mind, you actually have to kill the creatures that drop decays. Second to last, we have Blacksmithing, and we have the Molten Globule, which drops from any sort of enemy that drops rousing fire. Now, I told you we're going to go back to those Blazing Elementals from Jewelcrafting, and this is that time. So I am actually a blacksmithing jewel crafter myself. That is kind of my two professions on my Death Knight, and so I can farm in the same location, kind of near the siege starting area of the Waking Shores, and get both of these super, super fast. Actually, recording this, if you guys can't tell, I actually got them back to back, which was super nice, super simple, and I highly recommend this spot for jewel crafting and blacksmithing. Also, an additional tip for jewel crafters, you have to kill the elementals because that's actually where the drop is coming from, but if you are a blacksmith, you can actually kill the snails because the snails drop rousing fire as well. So you don't really have to be picky with the mobs you kill. Unless you're a jewel crafter, then of course, focus on the elementals. The second blacksmithing item you have is the Primeval Earth Fragment, which drops from any sort of enemy that drops rousing earth. And my favorite spot is kind of north of the Waking Shores. There are a ton of earth elementals, very easy, and also there's a lot of scouting packs around here, so if you're trying to get your treasure drop as well, this could be a good place around the river to fly around to. Then lastly, we have good old engineering. And you guys will probably love this name, but we have the Infinitely Attachable Pair of Docks, and this drops from any sort of dragonkin enemy. And so this is the same as Inscription. Once again, you can either go kill the Rebels, which is kind of tougher mobs but closer to Valdrakken, or you can go to the other valley area with the Ember Tooths and kill over there. Because my engineer is a hunter and I'm pretty bad at that character, I kind of struggled with the Rebels after trying it for a little bit, so I went over to the Ember Tooths and got it within about 5 minutes. So once again, either one is completely fine. Because I suck at the game, I went with the Ember Tooths. And we've officially saved the hardest item to the end, and this is the Keeper's Mark, which only drops from Titan enemies. And basically, the only location you can get this is in the tier hold area inside of Thaldraszus. Now, depending on your character level, this will either be very hard or very easy. this is a level 70 zone only, it does not scale, so if you have a max level engineer, this is just like any sort of other drop. However, if you're a lower level like me, I'm only level 62 on my engineer, this was definitely a struggle. Now, the Titan matrices around the area actually do scale, so if you can find a matrix alone, you can actually kill that yourself, or you will have to rely on other players. Thankfully, when I went into that zone, an elemental storm was happening, so there were a lot of people there killing things anyways, so I would just tag them and basically steal the loot. You could join a raid or party if necessary, but that is going to be a little bit of a struggle if you're lower level. So just keep that in mind. I did eventually get it. I think it took me about 15 minutes, but keep in mind I'm on the Hunter. Once again, I suck at that class. I was also level 62, so I was definitely on the struggle bus. But there we go, everybody. That is all of my favorite spots for every single lootable item. Just to recap, remember you can get 1 drop of each of these items every single week, meaning you can get 2 knowledge points per profession with each of these drops. Keep in mind that this only applies to crafting professions, so herbalist, miners, or skinners, you gotta get your points by actually gathering. Also, just a disclaimer, remember these are not the only locations to get these items. There are so many different spots scattered around the zone that you are more than welcome to pick if you don't like any of these. So these are not necessarily the ones you have to go to, so feel free to pick what's best for you. At the end of the day, I just kind of want to give you some guidance, but that doesn't mean you have to follow it. But everybody, thank you so much. I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any more questions in the comments down below, and have a good day.